under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to state the land acknowledgement.
Acknowledging and creating awareness about our past. We begin our joint board meetings by acknowledging that New Paltz is on the ancestral land of the Munsee, Esopus, and Lenape people.
Okay, I'm going to make sure that we have some items added to this joint business agenda that are new. So under item number 2, sex offenders, there's a discussion about the Department of Corrections and community supervision. Additionally, item number 3, there's a quick discussion about the Kingstonian and the pilot the developers are seeking. And item number 8 on this joint agenda is the agreement related to the Planning and Zoning Secretary. I'm going to go ahead and do the village agenda just while we're motioning. Well, or I can do that later. That's fine. So
it would be better to do it all now, Tim.
Let's just, yeah, okay, fine. So in the village agenda, I'm going to, yeah, I don't want to do this now. I just like to make a motion that we accept the joint agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Do we have any announcements?
The town needs to also approve the agenda.
We don't have quorum yet.
Oh, I see that. Okay.
We don't have a joint consent agenda, is that correct? Yeah, that makes sense, but that's something we would never ordinarily have. Correct?
Yeah, there is no.
Yeah.
Okay. Just bear with me 1 second. So should we continue with the village agenda if we're waiting for?
Yeah,
we have like we have presentation type stuff. Why don't we do
so
that?
yeah, get going on that.
Okay. So we have the joint business agenda, the police reform update. Why don't we go ahead and do that now?
Good evening, everyone. I am the spokesperson for the police, New Paltz Police Department Reform and Reinvention Committee. I want to get the whole name proper. Okay, so just to get you guys, keep you guys up to speed. So far, in October, we completed a town hall that was on October 22nd. Members of our committee also joined the police department in their firearms and defensive tactics training that was on October 25th. We are continuing to hold our weekly meetings. We have one next week, I'm sorry, tomorrow. And we're during those meetings, sorry. One moment, guys, I'm sorry about that.
No sweat.
It wouldn't be a village board meeting without some short visitors.
It's our frozen cat. It's almost over. I'm so sorry. Okay, so we're having our weekly meetings. We're continuing during those meetings, and for tomorrow, finishing going through the use of force policies with the chief. He's going over that with us and we're asking questions. And for the month of November, starting tomorrow, we are holding meetings weekly with specific community groups who we've scheduled meetings with. And then on January 9th, we are participating in the police department's departmental meeting. I think that's really it for the things that are upcoming and what we're working on. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Does anyone want to add discussion regarding the police reform update?
I just want to say thanks. Sounds like you've all been busy and things are moving along, and thank you.
And I need to hit rewind because I didn't ask if there were public comments related to the joint business portion of our agenda. So we do have a previously forwarded public comment from Daniel Schniedewind regarding the Trans-Hudson water supply project, or actually, I guess, providing water and sewer to that proposed development at the corner of 299 and North Putt. And I believe there was, I think Kitty Brown may be waiting for a chance to speak. I wasn't sure if she was looking to wait in the waiting room of the Zoom call or wait in the YouTube call. Do you have any idea, Ariana, how that should be handled?
If she has the Zoom link, there is no waiting room, so she would just be present. And I do not see her in the list of participants.
What about on the YouTube channel? Could she?
There's nothing on the YouTube channel.
Okay. She messaged me on Facebook Messenger, and I asked her the same question about YouTube versus Zoom. So we're not seeing it. So hopefully we'll hear from her at some point, and we can, provide that comment to our village board. Do we have any other public comments that we received? No?
No.
Okay, so on the joint business agenda, we added, I wanted to get the town, Neil and I have spoken about this, where the town is looking to adopt a new law in terms of asking hotel operators for a license to limit the number of sex offenders. So Neil, why don't you just give us, because I know you've spoken about it in your meeting, so why don't you just give us a quick summary of where that's at?
Sure. So we had a special meeting last week, and we declared lead agency on it, and we set a public hearing for a week from tomorrow. And so we're going to have a public hearing next Thursday, one in a week. And if people have comments, the law is on the town's website. If people have comments or they have thoughts about it, they should come to the public hearing. And basically, we're adopting the same law that a neighboring town has that just sets a limit, number of points that of sex offenders. We're following the same law that another town has, a total number of 6 points if there are 50 rooms. I think it's 9 points if there are more than 50 rooms. And so a level 1 is 1 point, a level 2 is 2 points, a level 3 is 3 points. And so you could have 6 level 1s, 3 level 2s, 2 level 3s, if you have fewer than 50 rooms. And the hotel motel has to register, and there's rules for compliance. Basically, we'll see what happens.
Got it. So Neil and you and I discussed this challenging situation the other day. Have you had any further thoughts or additional discussion about, because I think we both expressed similar concerns that, this would be useful if this is a way to manage the number of sex offenders in our community, but might there be any issues regarding constitutionality in terms of, could we, circumvent state laws or federal laws?
Yeah, I think it's always an issue. I think that, our best bet is really to have the state kind of step in and do a better job of, making, handling the situation instead of just dumping these people in a hotel or motel. I think there's got to be a better way to do it. Maybe have some more oversight. If someone was maybe on site supervising them, helping them transition, I think it'd be better for them, and it would be better for the town where these people are. But to just dump these people there and to have no oversight, I think doesn't do anyone any favors. The town where it's happening, or the people that are getting dumped there. So. Yeah,
and I would just add that for the public, that Neil and I have been trying to brainstorm about ways to approach this. So another thing, like in addition to seeing whether this town law could be useful, we've been in contact with, and we actually received some help from the Ulster County Executive's Office, and Mark Ryder put me in touch with the commissioner for the County Department of Social Services. I had a good conversation with him yesterday, and he was going to get us in touch with the commissioner, or actually the reentry manager for the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. So I think what we're trying to do is just to get a better sense of how this works, and to see what kind of monitoring of these sex offenders as well as services while they're in place exist. Because this is all new territory for New Paltz. We've not had level 3 sex offenders in the past, and we're trying to make sure that the state and the county are aware of concerns that we've heard from our community members. And as elected officials and as law enforcement, we want to make sure that if they are there, that we understand how the monitoring and the services are being handled. And another individual who I reached out to was Michael Berg from Family of Woodstock and Family of New Paltz, to see if there was a possibility to tap their reentry program, where they have case managers, and could those folks help in terms of providing case management services. So that's another avenue we're exploring. But we're also going to first see what type of assistance New York State provides for these individuals. So, this is all a conversation in progress, but I think it's incredibly important for our community to understand, how this works and its limitations, and why it's, especially challenging world to be involved in. So that's my update on that topic.
Yeah, and so this is Neil again. I just wanted to say, I think the reason this is happening now is because we're the path of least resistance, right? It's the only hotel in the county that's registered to accept level 3 sex offenders. And so the easiest thing for everyone is to just put these people here. And I think, our job is to, offer some resistance to that, and make sure that this isn't being done because it's the easiest way to do it. We want it to be done because it's the best thing to do, not because it's the easiest thing to do. And so no one does the hard thing unless they're forced to do it. And so that's how I look at what we're doing here. We're making people try to do the right thing, and we're not just trying to close the doors and keep everyone out. So.
Got it.
And Neil, is there existing regs in the state for limiting numbers of sex offenders in a particular structure, building?
Well, this is an existing law from another town, and it's been in place for a few years. So that's why we're doing this. I don't know about the state.
State regs, not regulations, not law.
I don't know. I would imagine if there were, they would be following them, but I don't know about the state regulations.
I just want to thank.
Yeah, I guess what we're also trying to do with. I was just going to add what we're also trying to do with this town law, because you always run the risk of a third party or the state to challenge your local law. So we're trying to be proactive by moving forward with the same law that the town of Lloyd has, but with any law, there's always the risk that it could be challenged. So the only way to find out if that risk exists is to move forward with the public hearing to see if the Department of State will pass this law.
Thank you both for all the time and investigation and conversations you've been having on this. I really like how you characterized it, like the people aren't going to do the hard thing. And you guys are providing a pathway that I think threads a really hard needle in terms of not wanting to keep people out, thinking about support services and restorative approaches. It's like a lot of complicated stuff, and I really appreciate the amount of effort you've put into it, and I know the community does too.
I appreciate it too. I wanted to see if anyone had considered the possibility that I know the reason we're doing, suggesting the Lloyd law, but is it possible we might consider a way that we wouldn't get level 3s, because if we are the only one in the county that accepts level 3s, are we setting ourselves up to get level 3s by having the law that allows that?
Right. So the way this works is you have a willing operator who is willing to accept the level 3s.
Right.
So when the state finds an operator willing to accept the level 3s, they're going to place the level 3s at that location.
And we could legislate, though, that that's not allowed?
I don't think we are allowed to do that.
Okay.
But that's why we're going to have a conversation with the folks from the State Department of Corrections. We want to, better understand, as the commissioner from the County Department of Social Services explained to me that their role is placement, but it's really the state that determines the eligibility of a particular offender. Okay, so do we have Jim and Eve here? They were going to touch base with us on county items. I see Eve. Oh, before Eve starts, and if Jim's here too, Kitty Brown is, sent me another message. She's trying to get in. I don't know if someone can help Kitty Brown make her public comment, but I guess she's having a hard time with the Zoom links. But Eve,
she should just be able to use it. There's no password or anything. If you have the link, you just click it and you can come in.
Yeah. Okay. So Eve,
I'll
thanks.
send her a message.
Thanks for joining us. Did you want to share anything with the town or village boards? I added something regarding the Kingstonian on here, but I'll let you start.
Sure. There were just two things. Tell me if my puppy's too loud because she's being very noisy. Just that in the budget, in the proposed 2021 budget, there were just two items that I just want to make sure you all knew about. The first one is the community development program. Have you looked at the 2021 county budget yet? Okay. So that's fine. I just didn't want to tell you what you already knew. So the idea of the community development program is to assist communities that wish to invest in initiatives that advance the county goals. It will not fund open space, recreation, or transportation, but that's because there's another one that will. It's a matching fund for basically infrastructure investments such as water and sewer. As probably you've experienced, or those of you who've been on this board in the past, while there is the $6 million put aside for this as matching funds for municipalities, we couldn't get any kind of guidelines of how will they decide how this will get distributed, and this has happened in the past. So I can't tell you how they will, just that they put that in the budget. And then the other one was is an open space and recreation fund. And this is for matching funds for open space protection, farmland preservation, and expansion of public recreation. And I thought it was also relevant, the question, the resolution that the village came up with and that passed actually helps the village for this one, because it's matching funds. And so something like that resolution is seen positively as a way a municipality can match the funds for something like that. So those two, and that one is $3 million put aside for that.
So is it just water sewer or other infrastructure as well? Do you know?
The first one, matching funds for infrastructure event, such as water and sewer, to assist economic development and housing projects, community service facilities such as health and childcare, public facilities that result in shared services and lower the cost in the community level. The required match will be determined on a case-by-case basis, will not exceed 75% of the costs, and will not exceed $500,000 for any project. There's more to it, but you can find it on in the descriptors. You know, if you get to it. You're muted. Yeah.
Sorry. If we have a water project where we're getting grant money for 60% of the project, so we need to come up with 40% match, can we use this grant? You know, if this is maxed out at 500K, can we use this grant for a piece of the match that we need for Environmental Facilities Corp?
I would hope so. I mean, like I said, when we pressed the executive's office on how exactly will they determine and who to give it to, they were very vague in that part. But I would certainly say that you should know that these exist, and I don't know what kind of conversations you have once this budget is passed. What kind of conversations do you have with the executive? But they just say it has to be matched, that the county is not paying 100%. They don't specify where that rest of the money needs to come from, just that the county will not pay all of it. So
that's
I would
fine.
say wherever. Sorry.
Yeah, that seems like that could work well if they would allow us to use this project. Like, we don't have a shovel in the ground yet. We're in the midst of finalizing engineering plans, but it's a $5 million project with $3 million of grants, so we got to come up with the remaining $2. So if we get 500K from the county, we easily have another 1.5 million of match to show the county.
Right. I get, and it has a final sentence that says priority will be given to innovative, ready to go projects. So I think, so these are all both of these are very positive on paper. I feel like this is my first year here, but that community developed, that has existed before and then ended up not really coming to fruition. But they're there, and I have no reason to believe they won't make it onto the 2021 budget.
Wow, that's super cool. Thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Oh, and I'll just clarify that it's basically they have a million per year till 2026.
Got it. Okay.
Not just
and then,
1 year.
So if this finds its way into the budget that the legislature will be voting on soon, like, do you know what the application process would look like, or
right.
that's to be
that's
determined?
What they haven't told us about. That's what we asked them sort of passively, but obviously once it happens, I imagine I'm neither on the facilities, subcommittee or the environmental subcommittee. I would assume they would take the charge of it, but I will certainly find out once this passes what that expectation is.
Well, that sounds great. We have an innovative and shovel-ready project, being finalized as we speak. So this could be really exciting, and the timing might not be better.
That's great. And then consider the open space one, because once you start collecting money from resolution 1, that money can be used as matched money for the open space. Sorry.
This could really, I mean, this could be a game changer for the village of New Paltz, because further down on our agenda, we have a discussion item where we might have to consider raising water rates because we're facing some cash flow problems. So if we had this grant money, that would help with those cash flow problems, where we could even hit pause on and maybe not raise water rates at all. So that could be really interesting to include as a reason as to why we would be a great candidate for this grant.
Yeah, so again, once it passes, we'll get more specifics. The open space one is budgeted at $500,000 a year till 2026.
That all said, though, and thank you for all of that, Eve. Budget cuts are looming, so it sounds like a place that cuts might happen. Do you have a sense of where cuts might be happening? I know we all would like to know the magnitude of cuts, and we don't know that yet, but
I don't think
I'd be hesitant to think about budget lines like that. I do a lot of grants. The state, they're paying us 20% less, just like state aid is 20% less. Obviously, what happens in the next couple of days is going to impact federal stimulus. But could you, I guess that just for a segue, you don't have to say whether you know.
Well,
this
I'll
is
just
gonna
say, I don't think it's
sense of budget.
right. I have not heard any sign that these would get cut from the budget. I guess I'm more worried that I mean, you recall back in Hines administration, there was things like this, that the money just sat there and kept asking questions like, how will you distribute it to municipalities? And they just never did. They never did anything with it. I'm more worried about that.
There are little buffer zones.
Right. So I don't think I have not heard any suggestion from any legislator that they're going to propose cutting this. So I would not be surprised if they both make it into the 2021. What ends up happening once they're approved is another story, but I'm guessing they'll make it. I think most of the cuts in the budget there may be some suggested personnel cuts. I don't know. We only just got the and I guess I'll just add this part, and that'll be my last report. So we got the budget review by our external reviewers just came yesterday. Unfortunately,
who did you hire for that?
I'm going to get it wrong. CBG.
You did not. Okay.
Is that, you know who I'm talking about? One of those acronyms. So we just got it yesterday. Unfortunately, even before anyone's been able to talk about it, it already got distributed to the executive's office. So just know, if you hear anything from their office, that is not anything that we've even had a back and forth about, that we haven't even been able to ask questions or ask for things differently. It was a bit of an issue that it would get sent to their office before we even reviewed it. But
if you could send us the link to that report when it's
public. I don't think once I can. Right now it's so preliminary that it's technical. It shouldn't, yeah. But we got it yesterday. And that's, I think, all I have to specifically. Obviously, the Kingstonian got postponed because they're waiting for the analysis. The analysis is here. So I'm sure it'll be back on the agenda.
So what we did as a village board is we have a follow-up to our September 9th position statement about pilots and the Kingstonian. And this follow-up position statement focuses on the way the tax cap levy law works and how pilots are included and how it's particularly harmful to different taxing authorities, but especially to school districts. You know, I'm incredibly concerned about the precedent that, you know, it could be set here. You know, we're regularly contacted by developers who are, you know, frothing at the possibility of constructing something in New Paltz, and you know, the Zero Place apartment complex is being built. It has a comparable amount of retail space that the Kingstonian has. It has affordable housing units. It has connections to the Empire State Trail. It has public bathrooms that will be maintained by the developer. So lots of the things that the Kingstonian is excited about providing to its community. But, you know, the plan for Zero Place is for it to pay its tax bill without receiving a payment in lieu of taxes program. So, you know, I just think it's especially challenging for municipalities that are trying to figure out how to pay for stormwater infrastructure and fire trucks and water and sewer. If the county IDA could go ahead and grant pilots like this, which, you know, could also put additional pressure on our school property taxes, which are 2/3 of our total property tax bill in communities like New Paltz. So, you know, I shared the statement with you, Eve, so you have it earlier this afternoon. So I'd like to just make a formal motion for our board to adopt this November 4th position statement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I really would encourage people to keep talking during the public comment. I mean, there are some legislators who I think can be persuaded and moved by good arguments. You know, where people who don't have a horse in this race and just have the information that's in front of them. So, you know, there were some good speakers at the last legislative meeting, but I definitely encourage bringing out in full force, speaking out at these meetings. It obviously will be voted on next month or this month coming up this month. So, and there's, I've seen changes of minds like in the moment. So, you know, even if compelling enough public comments could move a couple of legislators conceivably.
That's good to hear. You know, I just
Yeah,
think
what we
right
tried
here,
to,
right now, this is just like not what we should be doing. I mean, I'm writing up my public comment and I'll send it in. So I'm glad to hear that you think some people can still be moved.
I mean,
We're just talking about budget cuts. I think that this is, I you know, as a former school board member who was on the school board during the recession budget cuts, I'm mad they're even putting this to the work of a school district right now who's working night and day to deliver pandemic education in Kingston, where they're facing, you know, $14 million of budget cuts. That's like 140 teachers or staff lines.
you know, when they're making
This is so tone deaf to the moment.
do you know when the school board is going to be talking about this?
My understanding is nobody's gotten, I haven't heard, this is maybe 4 days old. Tim, you might have newer information, but my understanding is that the new, since they modified the pilot, now all the, what's the timeline rule book is shuffled again and trying to get figured out as it gets funneled through the IDA, then down to you all at the county ledge in the school district. And last I heard, the new version hadn't even made that step yet. So in fact, I think I saw it's President Shaughnessy, right? He's the president of the school board. I think he said
Jim is the president.
Yesterday or the day before, like, even if they give it to us today, we're not going to vote on it Wednesday because we don't have enough time.
They didn't get it yet?
No.
I thought the revised one was like at least a week ago, no?
Meaning they didn't get the
Not
report
the
from
formal
NDC?
process. they read about it in the newspaper, but
The
not,
NDC report?
yes, and the new pilot, the modified pilot. The
Right,
one where they
the-
said
the-
they
the-
doubled the tax payments when it was minuscule times 2.
Right, the proposed pilot from NDC is in that analysis.
They
Um,
packaged it together.
But my understanding is that there may be some other profit sharing discussion. But I spoke with President Jim Shaughnessy this week, and as recently as today, and he said that they did not have this topic on their agenda, but the position statement that we just described, that was shared with the Kingston Board of Ed. They have it. They may be discussing it tonight, just recognizing that they've received it. But what we were trying to do with that statement was to, and to Eve's point, is that some of this stuff is fairly esoteric, and it could be really helpful for legislators and board members who may be unfamiliar with pilot mathematics and the 8-step tax cap levy formula to understand that it's not just like, well, some money is better than no money if a project doesn't get built. Like that's the argument that I've heard for years about why pilots should be considered. And the reality is that that's just an incredibly naive interpretation of how pilot programs work. So what we tried to do with this statement is actually put numbers down and really explain the actual impacts with dollars and cents and the process and the alternatives and the decision points that the school board would be faced with.
So I'll just say that on October 23rd, we got an email from the executive saying, please see the attached final draft of the NDC analysis. They appreciate our patience. They work quickly as possible to generate a comprehensive report to address issues, and that so with the proposed changes, and that was on the 23rd. So I'm sort of surprised to hear that the school board did not get anything yet.
Yeah, I believe the school.
That's over a week ago.
I believe members of the school board have reviewed that publicly available October 23rd report. I'm unfamiliar with, like, are they expecting to receive something else? If there was going to be additional discussions. I mean, that NDC report I thought was curiously somewhat limited in that I don't feel it really dug too deep in terms of this concept of net benefits to the community. It seemed like its main role was just to propose a new pilot schedule, which was essentially just, instead of a payment in lieu of taxes over 25 years of $1 million, it's a hair over 2 million, which is still a whole lot less than if the property was fully taxed, and then creates this other harmful situation where the tax levy limit for the school district becomes harmed, and then the only way that they can deal with that is to either cut programming or seek a supermajority via referendum from the property taxpayers.
Well, I'll say while previously the executive was very much against it, this letter reads like he's very much for it. I mean,
I think he's stated his position. I mean, he that was the deal that he garnered. It's far, 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 far short of what I think is required.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure you understood where your allies were, or where the allies, not yours. They're not yours. There's plenty of people in this county who are against this. Okay, well, that's that.
I mean, I would just say, there's also strong environmental arguments against this. There's no, in this day and age, you know, and I know some folks are just sticking with the pilot analysis, which I think is enough. But I think like with everything, we have to evaluate it right here, right now. And we were a county in a housing crisis before this happened. And now we're in a pandemic economy with a housing crisis on steroids. And this is not what we need. This is not what the county needs. And I guess before you said something like there, you know, some legislators who have no horse in the race, you know, I think
Read that they're
we're
not.
all connected. Yeah, no, I mean, then maybe we should also talk to them about actually, no, if these taxes are foregone, they have to come from somewhere else. And that somewhere else can definitely ripple back to the us here, out here.
I mean, KT, I appreciate the points that you're making, and you know, I agree with them. I feel like what we've tried to do as a village board, though, and you know, using that phrase like "stay in our lane," you know, our 9-9 position statement had to do with you know, pilots, and then forfeiting taxpayer revenue because of we have this, you know, this challenging relationship in terms of how sales tax is distributed within our county. And this updated position statement really focuses on, you know, the what I would consider a dangerous precedent that could be set for-profit housing, lodging, and retail that I would not think are deserving of pilots, because then we run the same risk of, you know, another developer showing up in New Paltz demanding the same type of pilot that the Kingstonian was awarded by appointed officials on the county IDA.
Yeah, and we should, if this is, I mean, I've said it a zillion times, I don't want this in my economic development toolkit, but if the county chooses to have pilots in its toolkit, this is a real bad one out of the pandemic gate, because it's going to set some expectations, as Tim said. And this is the process. We're not supposed to, you know, it's not supposed to be expected that every project before the IDA gets its blessing. And that's a county level board, and we're all connected. And I'll talk about the other things that we're not talking about to stay in our lane here, you know, just as an individual. But I do think you can make a cogent argument that it's not aligned with county documents like the people-centered economy, as well as all the environmental plans that want to move us off our fossil fuel dependence. I mean, we know in New Paltz, that's the biggest part of our footprint is transportation. And
Right.
leaders, that's what you got to do. You got to make hard choices. I mean, we know as a village board, because we have conversations with our small businesses, not all of them, because they're not homogenous either, about parking and what we, you know, how we address that here. So, you know, building parking lots is indefensible in terms of the existential climate change crisis we face right now.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up the parking lot thing, KT.
But I just wanted to add that I think the point that you're making, and I agree with you, is that this concept of staying in your lane is like, our lane's pretty wide, and you know, these projects and this type of you know, if this decision were to move forward, you know, it would be impactful for county residents, particularly New Paltz residents. So I would probably share your, you know, your thinking that our lane is wide.
Can I ask, how is this coming up in the Board of Supervisors and Mayors? Like, what are the other supervisors and mayors feeling?
We haven't had a discussion about the Kingstonian pilot as a board. I've just spoken with individual supervisors. And, you know, without naming names, I'll say, you know, some feel concerned and some feel like it's not their business to opine.
Okay, just because that's another, I mean, where the legislature is a stopgap for this if it votes it down, but it's not a stopgap if it doesn't vote it down. And I will say that it also, several legislators are very, very often listening to what their supervisors and mayors are telling them. And so if that Board of Supervisors and mayors did want to come out strongly against this, it would go pretty far.
Well, I think we've covered the Kingstonian pilot fair enough for this evening, or a decent amount for this evening. Do you have anything else county related that you want to share with us, or should we move on and hear from Amanda and Janelle?
I think I'm good, unless
Good.
you have questions for me.
Perfect. Thanks again for showing up. It's really helpful that you've made a point to be here every month.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Eve.
Thank you all for what you're doing. I'm going to go
Thank you,
and
Eve.
watch CNN like I can't take my eyes off of it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, Janelle, you want to, is Amanda here too?
Amanda is on the call. She's in the meeting, but she
Oh, I see her.
double booked with Ulster County Planning Board. So you have me.
Nice.
So introduction, I'm Janelle Piotr, as you know, the volunteer Climate Smart Coordinator. And just to provide a context for tonight's presentation, I wanted to remind you that about a year ago, we were working on the climate vulnerability assessment. And that was done with great work by ICLEI, the Local Governments for Sustainability. And we worked with Jesse Carpentier and Cale Roberts on that project. About the end of June, we were contacted again by Jesse from ICLEI. And she said that we had been basically nominated to work with Woodwell, or at the time it was called Woods Hole Climate Research Center, to do our flood mapping. And we were very excited because we realized this is a huge opportunity, and funds as they are to be offered a project like this where it was being done for us for free. That was exciting. So we contacted Tim and Neil, and they have been incredibly supportive, and thus began conversations and data sharing. Very grateful to Blue and Chris and all of the town and village employees that just provided a lot of data and working with Woodwell. So I would like to also thank Amanda Gatto. Even though she's listening, I have to say, she, as a volunteer project manager, she really facilitates so much behind the scenes that you don't even know about. So I'm eternally grateful for Amanda's work. So at this point, I'd like to introduce David McGlinchey. He is the Chief of External Affairs at Woodwell Climate Research Center, and he's going to be introducing the rest of his team. I have to tell you that the byline for their organization is Climate Science for Change. Gotta love that. So thank you, David, very much, and the rest of the team for being here tonight and doing this presentation on flood mapping. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janelle. And am I coming through? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. And we're sharing presentation here that will include a brief overview that I'm going to give, and then my colleague Dominic Dussault is going to present the actual research. So thank you, Janelle. As Janelle said, I'm the Chief of External Affairs at the Woodwell Climate Research Center. We are a nonprofit science institution based in Falmouth, Massachusetts. Some of you, as Janelle alluded to, may have known us by our previous name, the Woods Hole Research Center, but we renamed ourselves this summer in honor of our founder, George Woodwell. We're here this evening. We've all been watching election results. Time is just running into each other. We're here this evening because we have a program that is focused on modeling and assessing future climate risk. That work has historically been done with partnerships focused on large private sector industry leaders, essentially looking to shift the way industries think about and treat climate risk. But we've recently launched a pilot project with our partners at ICLEI to extend this science to local governments who do not usually have access to this kind of information. Our pilot project includes climate change-driven flood risk assessments for 3 communities. New Paltz, obviously, a city in Iowa, and then the city of Chelsea, right near us here in Massachusetts. This is actually the first presentation that we're making of this research, and we're really appreciative of your partnership and very excited about providing this research. As a result, we actually have a few representatives on this call. I mentioned Dominic Dussault. He is the scientist who led this research. He's a flood modeling specialist here at the center, and he did the bulk of this work. He's really exceptional. We're lucky to have him, and we're very lucky that he was assigned to this project. Christopher Schwalm is the head of our risk division. He was also involved in the work. He unfortunately could not join us. He's based in Berlin, and so with the time difference, he was just not able to be here. We're also joined by my external affairs colleagues, Emily Marshall and Natalie Balageron. And I believe we might have Alex Goldstein on the call as well, who handles our communications. So we brought quite a crew here this evening. I in particular want to thank Amanda and Janelle for their great help on this project, connecting us with local data sets, and just in general, helping us understand the needs of the community. I also want to thank ICLEI, Jesse Carpentier from ICLEI, got us going on this partnership and also connected us with some other cities. And we are hopeful that, or we're planning that after we present this science and deliver it to you, she is going to be able to help turn this research into tangible next steps to make New Paltz a more climate resilient community. And again, just to clarify, as Janelle said, this work that we're presenting this evening and any follow-up is free of charge to New Paltz. There are firms, of course, that provide this kind of risk assessment for a price, but we believe that this science is inherently a public good and should be publicly available. A few quick words about who we are and in general, why you should trust us with this research, and then I will hand it over to Dom to speak about the flood risk in general, the methodology for this project, and then the results. So Dom, could you switch over the slide, please? So we were founded as the Woods Hole Research Center in 1985 to study climate change and to deliver that science to policymakers and decision makers. We do this because the Earth is rapidly warming as a result of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions and also deforestation. This is an urgent and near-term threat to our health, to our economies, to our way of life. And we believe it is the primary crisis that we're facing in this coming century. Our work, Dom, if you could move over, next slide. Our work has been on the international, national, and local government level. As you can see on our timeline here, we were involved in launching the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Our scientists have been involved with the scientific body there, the IPCC, since its founding. Our former president and our current president are both alumni of the Obama administration's climate science team. And we are cautiously optimistic about a presidential administration in the coming year that is interested in integrating climate science into their policymaking. Dom, if you can move to the next slide. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Dom to talk about the work that we did focused on New Paltz.
Thank you, Dave. So as Dave mentioned, my name is Dominic Dussault. I'm a research assistant in the risk group at the Woodwell Climate Research Center. And so in the risk group, we analyze a variety of different climate perils. This ranges from extreme heat, droughts, wildfire, and in this case, extreme precipitation and flooding. And we know from extensive research in the scientific literature that climate change is no longer a future phenomenon. Temperatures are rising, sea levels are rising, and we're experiencing more intense precipitation events. We know that for every degree of warming, the atmosphere can hold 7% more water vapor. In the National Climate Assessment for the United States, we see that across the country, extreme precipitation is intensifying, and the Northeast region is experiencing the greatest amount of change within this metric. But we also know that flooding is not new to New Paltz. In 2011, New Paltz experienced an extreme flood event from Hurricane Irene where about 10 inches were dropped over a weekend, which resulted in a significant flood event. In 1955, the stream gauge in Gardner on the Wallkill River recorded its record river stage height when 2 hurricanes hit the region about a week apart from each other. And so in this flood study, what we're going to show is not only present and historical risk, but also how that flood risk is going to change into the future. So we're going to look at 2 different sources of flood risk in New Paltz. The first and more commonly known one is riverine flooding. And this is simply when a river overtopped its banks and water moves into the adjacent floodplain. Here we're showing a base map of New Paltz in the general region to give you a foundation for future maps that we'll show in the presentation where we'll overlay flood risk layers. And so we see here you have Gardner in the southern part of the map. The Wallkill River is flowing from south to north, the New Paltz village and New Paltz town, and then you have the Hudson River towards the east. The second part, second source of flooding that we'll be looking at is called pluvial flooding. And this is when water, so a stormwater system or soils aren't able to properly convey or infiltrate rainfall, leading to standing water, as we see in this picture. Part of the study was trying to identify the capacity of the stormwater system in New Paltz. And because the system is quite old, we were unable to calculate that figure, but we were able to gather some information on the culverts in the New Paltz region. Culverts are just simply passages under highways or bridges that convey water, especially during extreme precipitation events. And what we found is that a lot of the culverts are only able to convey the 1 in 5 to 1 in 20 year rainfall event. And this is significantly lower than the level of rainfall that we'll be looking at in this study. So they're significantly undersized currently, and as we'll see, significantly undersized for future rainfall events. But before we go into the results of the study, I want to briefly mention the methodology and the inputs that go into the flood model. The first and probably the most significant input is elevation data. And we take LIDAR, which is high accuracy, high resolution elevation data at the 7-meter horizontal scale. The next input is rainfall data, which we take from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The third is stream flow, which we take from the Gardner Stream Gauge Station. The fourth is the infiltration rates, which we assign depending on the soil type in the region. We do try to incorporate the stormwater system in this input, but as I said, we were unable to capture that capacity. However, the results of this flood study are still robust. It's just that we like to incorporate as much information as possible when we complete a flood study. And finally, we have land friction values. So when water overflows the banks of a river, the type of land cover will affect how that water flows. And so we want to capture that phenomenon in our flood model. So once we have all these inputs, we incorporate them into our flood model, LIS-FLOOD-FP. We chose this flood model because it has been extensively peer reviewed and it has been validated against historical flood events. So we have high confidence in its ability to simulate current and future flood events. We run the flood model for a 24-hour simulation, and we get 3 different flood results. The first is the flood depth, the flood extent. So this just shows how far into the floodplain the water reaches. The second is the depth. So what is the depth of the water in a certain flood event? And then finally, we capture these 2 metrics at a 20-minute interval, which allows us to create an animation of the flood progression over time. So as we go into the results, we first present the 100-year flood compared to the current Federal Emergency Management Agency 100-year flood map. So what we show here is the extent of the map on the right is the town boundary. The New Paltz Village is shown in yellow. The Woodwell model extent is kind of that rust color. And then the FEMA model is kind of that blue, dark blue outline. The more pale blue are the permanent water bodies. And so what we see is that the FEMA flood model matches closely with the Woodwell model extent, but only close to the Wallkill River floodplain. Beyond that, we see that Woodwell captures much more flood extent. And this is mainly because FEMA only models riverine flood events. They don't model pluvial flooding or flooding in small streams. So that's why all this area into the eastern portion of the map and to the west isn't captured by FEMA. And that's an important underestimation in the FEMA flood maps. I also want to point out that the current extreme streamflow value used in the FEMA map is from 1984. And so often FEMA doesn't update their underlying data, even if they make a new effective map. And finally, FEMA only shows historical flood risk. They don't incorporate any changes in the climate. And so that's something we want to highlight later in the study. And so as we move into the future, we analyze how extreme rainfall and extreme stream flow will change in 2 future time periods. So here we're showing the 1 in 100 year, 1 in 500 year rainfall and stream flow events, the future return periods of those 2 events in 2 separate time periods. The first time period is 2041 to 2060, and the second 2071 to 2090. We picked these 2 time periods for very specific reasons. The first is that this first mid-century time period is centered on 2050. So it gives a good indication of how flooding will change in the next 30 years. The second time period, which represents the kind of the later 21st century, was chosen because it's centered on 2080. And a lot of the infrastructure built today will most likely still be in use by that future time period, given that design lifetimes for infrastructure is usually 50 years. And usually the infrastructure is often maintained longer than that. And so we want to show how infrastructure built today will experience future flood risk. So the way to read this table is that if we look at the 100-year rainfall event in 2071 to 2090, we see that the future return period becomes a 25-year event, indicating that the storm becomes 4 times as likely. And so not only do we see an intensification in rainfall over time, so it becomes a 1 in 67 year in 2050 and then 1 in 25 year by 2080 period. We also see that in stream flow as well. So these similar changes, we see that extreme rainfall and extreme stream flow will intensify into the future. So once we have these 2 different components, rainfall and stream flow, we use them as inputs into the flood model to see how the flood extent and flood depth will change into the future. So to give an overall idea of how flood risk will change, we present 2 metrics here. The first one on the top is the percent change in flood area. And so we see for the 100-year event, we see that the flood extent for the overall model domain in the New Paltz region, the flood extent increases by more than 7% by the 2041-2060 period, and then by more than 20% by the 2071 to 2090 period. So these are significant changes in flood risk just in the 100-year event. And we see similar changes, slightly less in the 1 in 500-year event. And then the second metric that we show is the change in average water depth. And we choose this metric because it gives a good indication of the increase kind of building damage that would be experienced due to these higher water levels. So the 100-year event increases in water depth by about almost half a foot by the 2041 to 2060 time period, and then more than a foot by 2071 to 2090. So these are significant changes in flood depth, which will cause not only increased building damage, but will cause significant pieces of infrastructure to stay offline longer, which would kind of reduce the amount of time, so reduce resiliency of a community to bounce back from an extreme flood event. And so while we show these overall statistics, it's also good to get an idea of how spatially these changes are manifested into the future. So this map shows the change in percent change in the water depth of the 100-year events in the 2041 to 2060 time period. The yellow color represents closer to 0% change, and as we get darker into the red, that represents more of a 100-year percent change. And you can tell where the floodplain extends further to what didn't exist before by identifying these very dark areas, very orange-like areas. So in the northern part of the new Paltz town, you can really see how these darker areas pop up, and this is where the floodplain extends further than what it was historically. We also show this for the 100-year event in the 2071 to 2090 time period. And we see much bigger changes in the water depth in this area. So not only the northern part of the flood map, but also in the eastern part where there's more pluvial flooding. And I do want to point out this area, kind of in the northern part, kind of northwestern part of the New Paltz village, kind of near the golf course where the floodplain extends into current developed areas. So this will be a significant area of risk in the future. And so I just want to point out that area because it is crucial to understand where current development will be affected by future flood risk and not areas where development is expected to occur. And so we also show these maps for the 500-year events. So this is the 500-year event in the 2041 to 2060 time period. We see similar changes to compared to the 100-year events in this time period, slightly darker colors along the Wallkill River. And then for the later time period, 2071 to 2090, we again see much darker colors pretty much everywhere along the map. And I especially want to point out again, that area close to the New Paltz golf course. And again, the northern part of the flood map where the floodplain really extends further than where it was historically. And so to give a good indication of the current infrastructure, the current buildings at risk, and then also where the future buildings at risk will be, we show the number of buildings that will be affected in the present time period. So this is the 2001 to 2020, and also in the future time periods. And we only show the buildings that are affected by a water depth greater than 15 centimeters, which is about 6 inches, or the height of the curb. So anywhere above this level has a propensity to affect a building. And so we start just shy of 1,000 buildings in the 100-year event in the current present period. And then that increases by 12% in the 2041 to 2060 time period, and then much bigger, 34% by the 2071 to 2090 time period. So these are significant changes to buildings that already exist. And this doesn't even incorporate future development. So these are significant changes, and I think present a good overview of how flood risk will affect New Paltz in the future. And then finally, we want to show we want to show an animation of the flood map. This is the 100-year event in the 2071 to 2090 time period. So this is the 24-hour simulation of the flood model. And as we can see, the flood plains start to extend around the 8-hour mark. So really, that is that pluvial riverine element. And then by the 18-hour mark, we see all the pluvial elements become incorporated. So those small streams that really start to pop out. And so we see that the SUNY campus starts to pop out at that moment, and also near to the wastewater treatment plant. You can see there's significant risk to that piece of the infrastructure. And so to conclude, we want to highlight that these results should really be incorporated into future planning and infrastructure decisions, and really inform regulatory flood maps, because that will really affect how infrastructure and planning decisions and development decisions will be made in the community. And so thank you again for having us, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dominic, and David. We really appreciate the presentation tonight, and I'm glad it's being recorded because there's a lot more people that I think are going to be very interested in this information. I was wondering, in terms of the buildings that were listed, the numbers of buildings impacted, are those based on current buildings that are in those locations or projections of potential buildup?
That's current buildings. So the data set was created by Columbia University, where they took high resolution elevation data and extracted building outlines from that data. So that just represents current building locations. And it's a very high quality data set. So it represents the majority of buildings in New York State.
I think one of the things that struck me just in first reviewing the information that you put together for us is that I didn't realize that FEMA had such inadequate modeling, and to realize that it really doesn't include the pluvial impact. And knowing from a vulnerability study that the number of extreme precipitation events are projected to nearly double by 2100, that seems to be, you know, a really important gap for us to be aware of and plan for.
Yeah, can I add to that? Thank you so much. Just this past summer, in I think July, the state legislature had passed, an act to try to tackle some of that inadequacy with, the flood maps and stuff from FEMA, and of course all the different rollbacks from Trump's, dirty water rule. This is really helpful too, because I learned basically this summer that all the stream maps and flood maps like that we have like in New York State tend to be woefully inadequate, which just boggles my mind. How do you even plan accordingly, especially in the midst of the global climate change crisis? So thank you for this.
I've got a quick, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I was just gonna comment on, you highlighted how our wastewater treatment plant is vulnerable because of its proximity to the river. And that's something that's been on our radar screen for some time. Actually, we had considered building, and it's a oddly low-tech solution, but building these walls to surround the water treatment plant to protect it from flooding, or if water levels rise. It was a project that was considered when the town and the village of New Paltz were considering lots of different projects to be part of the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery that we've been working on for many years at this point. And we decided not to move forward with that project because it would cost about $4 million just to construct these walls around the wastewater treatment plant. And my understanding, if we were to site a wastewater treatment plant somewhere else, the replacement cost would be about $30 million, which, municipalities like ours, that's just a non-starter, and protecting it at $4 million, this is a non-starter. What we're doing with our Governor's Office of Storm Recovery money is we're constructing a new town and village fire station that will function as a emergency operations center, because we think, having a well-resourced fire department is the best way for us to be prepared for emergencies like storms. So we're building that on the eastern side of our town, above this floodplain area. But you know, that, I mean, that's you know, that's kind of the challenges that we face. Like, you know, have you heard other comments like this where, you know, municipalities like ours, like, how do we even begin to prepare for some of this stuff where, you know, we barely have money to pay for the most basic projects? Like, we're super excited. You know, you heard us talking earlier about replacing some 100-year-old water mains just so we can provide safe and clean drinking water to our community. Being prepared for what ifs many, many decades from now is not at the top of our list. I'm just curious if you're receiving similar feedback from other municipalities.
I'll just, first of all, it's great that this is already on your mind and that you're thinking about future risk. This is the first presentation we made to a municipality. This is our maiden voyage here. So we haven't got that direct feedback yet. I would, again, though, I mean, you all already work with ICLEI, but I can't say enough good things about them. And in terms of kind of best practices or, you know, identifying maybe low-cost solutions to protecting water treatment plant, I would, you know, first turn to ICLEI. But I'll also say that kind of as we build up our work with cities and towns, we're hoping to construct a network of some sort. We haven't ironed this out entirely, but where people could simply share best practices, where you could ask a question like that, and maybe the folks in Decorah, Iowa, have thought this through and, you know, have confronted the same challenge and solved it for less than $1 million, or, you know, whatever their approach might have been. So we're hopeful to help there and provide that, but again, ICLEI, I think, is the most obvious resource for best practices there.
We actually, when we learned of the $4 million price tag to construct walls around our water treatment plant property, we're like, this seems crazy. Like, what else could we do to be better prepared in a flood type situation? So we had our engineer, you know, go back to the drawing board and come up with like a system of pumps to install within the wastewater treatment plant property. And even that alone was like $300,000. And we soon moved even away from that as a project to consider, because we were like, you know, $300,000, like, we need to spend that money on this fire station that is in desperate need of replacing and an upgrade. So it's and yeah, it'll be interesting once you gather more feedback from other municipalities. I fear that, you know, we're all in the same situation where we don't have two nickels to rub together to do the right thing for decades from now. Like, we're hanging on just to provide the most basic services.
I've got a quick question, and maybe Tim, you know this. Have there been studies on our existing capacity with our culverts and swales and that kind of infrastructure that exists in our village? Whereas do we stand a chance in 30 or 40 years for our existing stuff to be able to handle what's going to happen, what's potentially going to happen?
I can take the culvert question. So the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has run a project where they've tried to analyze as many culverts as possible in the state in terms of their capacity. And what we see is that a lot of them are kind of undersized, where they can only handle the 1 in 5 year events, and sometimes 1 in 20 year event, really not close to the 1 in 100 year event whatsoever. But that's only the culverts that we've been able to identify. So that part of the stormwater system we know is undersized.
You know, I have a question about that, because I think this is a really interesting topic, and you guys probably have heard this discussion before. It was new to me when it was brought to my attention, but I've heard, from conversations I've had with our engineers, like what's really hard about this culvert question is, you can have a system of culverts and like it's hard, you have different schools of thought in terms of like what's considered right sized, because in some ways you don't want the stormwater to move too quickly through your system, because then if you have just giant fast moving culverts, then you end up with a bunch of water somewhere else, and then what do you do with all that water once it gets there? So there's like an art and a science to having a combination of like what's right sized and what's too big. I'm just curious if you have thoughts on like how to figure that out.
Yeah, it's really a systems problem where similar like traffic. And the part of the problem is that jurisdictions over the stormwater system vary depending on where you are. For example, the state roads, the Department of Transportation for the state is responsible for that stormwater system, whereas local roads, the municipality is. Culverts, who knows, right? And so there is some uncertainty where these agencies aren't really talking to each other and sizing correctly. They all have their different standards. And so part of the solution would be to have a more standardized system in terms of interagency collaboration when you're building stormwater systems or upgrading them, instead of just siloed projects, have a more system-wide approach.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up is super fascinating in terms of jurisdictions, and then also like sensibilities. Like we deal with this in the winter because in New Paltz, we have state roads that crisscross our community as well as local roads and county roads. And my understanding is that the state, their MO is to get every speck of snow off the road because they just need those roads to be clean and dry. Whereas village roads, we are more comfortable with keeping snowbanks on part of the street, because the alternative is then they go up on sidewalks or they go on people's property. So we're doing a bit more of a dance in terms of like how to move the snow and then allow it to melt in some sort of organized way, whereas the state just has like a black and white mandate where they're just like, if it's our road, there can't be any snow on it whatsoever. And then that creates all sorts of, tricks for us. So, I mean, I'm getting a little too granular in terms of it just, just this whole like stormwater management, there's like several layers of nuance to it, which makes it difficult. So even if we were prepared for larger storms, there's probably no, there's no like easy infrastructure solutions or plans either. Like, once we open this Pandora's box, we're going to find out there's lots of hard questions to answer.
This is Neil. I was going to make a comment too. Thanks for the presentation. I think it's super helpful for us, and I agree with Tim. We don't necessarily have the money to build bigger culverts right now, but I think what we do have is the ability to change our zoning, to change our laws, to I think, and the town did this a few years ago with I think one of the stronger wetland laws, are floodplain laws, right? That makes it a lot harder to build in the floodplain, so we're avoiding problems in the future. But I think one of the things we can do, we the people in New Paltz overwhelmingly passed a local law that lets us preserve open space and working farms, and I think with that fund, we're going to be able to focus on areas that are potential problems in the future. If someone wants to, and I think we incorporated this into the plan that we put together, right? That we'll be able to, if there's a piece of property and someone wants to put a development easement on it, it gets more points if it's, in the floodplain. And so we're avoiding future problems, and we're also preserving open space. So doesn't matter if farmland floods, but if someone builds houses there, it's going to be really expensive. And I think that those are the type of things that we can do. And knowing where the problems are going to be in the future, or bigger problems are in the future, I think it's pretty useful.
Yeah, I would like to echo agreement with Tim and Neil. I mean, Tim points out just how expensive mitigation is, you know, with infrastructure. It's crazy expensive. But Neil, you're saying, you know, one of the things that we can control is prevention through zoning and planning. And I think that's really critical. Not only does, you know, preventing build out also creates less impervious surface, which will only exacerbate flooding. So I think that's really key. And I think all of this speaks to what needs to be some next steps is for us to be writing our climate adaptation plan, which we have not done yet. And those might be some of the things that, you know, could be included in that.
I'd also just add, Janelle, and suggest that, you know, near term, kind of a wholesale overhaul of your infrastructure, I mean, for any community is not realistic. But at certain points, infrastructure needs to be upgraded, or, you know, that's going to occur naturally. And when you reach that point, our hope is that having this science available will kind of inform the standards to which you're building new infrastructure.
Yeah, I think the point that Neil was highlighting is like one of the few tools we have in our tool chest is that we can change zoning. So we can change zoning to be more responsible in terms of how we manage stormwater, but then we use reports like this to defend the zoning changes that we make. So I think that's at least the thing that we can do as local writers of code.
Can I ask a question? So I'm looking at this simulation here. First of all, this is happening in only a 24-hour period, so it's pretty dramatic. And I'm looking at your scale there on the bottom, where the colors go from a 0.15 of a meter to 10 meters. Are there actually spots in New Paltz that reach the 10 meter? I'm seeing a couple of darker spots up there towards the north. Do we actually get to 10 meters?
That's in the very deepest part of the river, and that's more upstream.
Okay.
So it's not actually near the village. It's just very upstream. There are maybe very small areas. It's not a significant portion of the flood map whatsoever. But
Okay.
it just show the range. But yeah, I guess that is a little misleading to think that.
Well, it's very scary.
Yeah, it is scary. 10 meters is a lot of water. But it doesn't, for example, here in kind of New Paltz Village, you're looking more at kind of a few feet of water, maybe a little bit more than that in certain areas. So the vast majority doesn't reach that.
Okay, so maybe it would be helpful for us, Dom, in the future, if on that scale down there, you could give us a couple of intermediate points so we can kind of, because, you know, it goes from not too much to a whole lot, and it's like, whoa, if that might be helpful for us too. But anyway, it's great information. And I love this animation because it really gets your attention. It's clearly, I mean, the work you've done is so important, but the gravity of what you're showing us as the results are very important. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And Amanda, I'm just going to speak for Dom here to say that, you know, of course, we've shared this information as a PDF. We're happy to share the animation as a separate file, but any of the data that Dom used that went into this, you know, we want to share with you, and, you know, in the way that you find it most useful.
Thank you. Yes, we definitely would like to put this, be able to post this on our webpage, but also we will be using this. We want to show this to, you know, our ENCB people, to our CWAS people, you know, to our different groups, and also at our Winter Expo, where we can reach the community at large, just to let people know that this type of work is being done, and, you know, and that New Paltz has it available to use, the way Tim and Neil were saying, to help justify whatever policy decisions might be needed. Well, I think I hope this project, you're rolling it out to other communities. I'm sure they're going to be equally as appreciative of it. And it would be fun to, have you let us know how that all ends up.
Well, and I just want to say thank you again for your partnership on this. We've been very excited to work on it, and we continue to be here as a resource if you have follow-up questions.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. So we're gonna move on to, we had this as a discussion item, water sewer at the Trans Hudson site, and we had a public comment from Dan Schniedewind on this topic earlier. I could probably summarize the comment. I'm opening it up now. So he brings up a few points regarding the Trans Hudson proposal to construct retail at the corner of North Putt and 299. Number one is the non-compliance with New Paltz's zoning. I'm looking at what was written here. It's a mention of urging the town board not to grant 2 zoning exemptions currently sought by Trans Hudson. These, so it's basically, I guess the town board has been asked to waive zoning requirements. Number 2 is bike ped safety, and I believe this has to do with the fact that there is an intersection, or the DOT has approved a connection from the Route 299 into the retail complex. So the public comment says it's an unnecessary driveway from Route 299 crossing the 2-way traffic on the Empire State Trail. And then number 3, traffic impact. Just, I guess this has to do with, and I'm not reading this verbatim because it would just take too long, so I apologize for not doing this, but we'll make this available as part of this meeting so anyone can read this in its entirety. But I guess further, the earlier version of the project studied in the traffic analysis did not contain restaurant drive-throughs, and seems like that's part of the current proposal. And then the concluding paragraph is, while I understand the village's interest in improving its water sewer infrastructure, I urge board members not to enter into an agreement with Trans Hudson until they present a plan that is safe, zoning compliant, and which would not result in a major negative traffic impact. Okay, so that's the public comment, and I think what's important.
Kitty was here, and she sent a short little letter that she asked me to read because she had to go.
Okay, so you're going to summarize that?
Yeah, it's super summarized. It's actually pretty short. Dear Village Board members, concerning your discussion about granting water and sewer to the Trans Hudson CBS project, the project will be a benefit to our community only in all caps when it complies with the Gateway MSMU zoning. See below, and she cut and paste the purpose of that new district. However, at this time, the developers have a lawsuit on hold that seeks to strike down that zoning. The concept plan you are reviewing does not comply with the new zoning and will provide none of the community benefits your board supported during the rezoning process. Until the town and the developer resolve this threat, please do not vote on this action. The Gateway Zoning Committee was comprised of both town and village residents, and we need the developer to understand that while we may be 2 governments, we are one united community. The community benefit, quote unquote, that the developer is offering shows a municipally operated restroom. Taxpayers do not want to take on this financial burden. Water Street Market operates a public restroom adjacent to the rail trail at its own expense. This is a quote gift that keeps on taking, unquote, and we don't want it. Thank you, Village Board, for listening. Kitty Brown. We're not voting on this tonight. Maybe it would be a good idea in your comments just to go through what the process is, Tim.
Yeah, I was going to describe the process. So for any property that is interested in being added to, or if they're interested in having a new water or sewer district created, the way it works is that project petitions the town board, and then the town board asks the village board. So under no circumstances should Trans Hudson be petitioning the village. It's the town who petitions the village. But also, just to get clarification, and maybe the town board members can explain this to us, but my understanding of what Trans Hudson has been trying to do with this project, after being before the planning board for many, many years, I was actually on the planning board when they first approached the town. They've made changes to their plan, including putting buildings in the front of their property to create more of a streetscape. And at that point, in 2013, 2014, there was no Empire State Trail. So this new project includes using the property to connect the Empire State Trail from east to west. So no cyclists or pedestrians are fooling around with that intersection. My understanding is the reason that they're asking for the exemptions from the zoning is because they would be constructing parking for the Empire State Trail at this location. So the alternative to not, that seems to me like a reasonable trade, in that you don't build a second story, because in lieu of the second story, you're gonna make the parking available to users of the EST. And then, I think the ask of the developers should absolutely be to have them construct and maintain public bathrooms. I think that would be very useful if it was indeed a EST dedicated parking area for visitors. And I think having an EST dedicated parking area would support those retail shops. So, I don't think asking, and this would be something for the town planning board, or I guess the town board in this situation, since they're asking you guys for exemptions, it seems to me that that's why you would say, yeah, we'll consider giving you the exemptions if you maintain the bathrooms. But what else am I missing here? And the other piece that we spoke about as a village board when we discussed this back in 2019 is there's a benefit to creating a loop for water and sewer from Main Street to Henry W., where the fire station and now the police station will be. The police station also needs to be connected to Muni water, and so does the fire station. And one of the reasons that we have tuberculated or brown water in our community is because of water dead ends. So if we could eliminate the dead end with Muni water that currently ends on Henry W. and connect it so it wraps around on Putt to Maine, that seems like there would be a valuable net benefit to New Paltz municipal water users.
So what's the timeline for the town petitioning us for that? And what's the process for that?
Neil, are you aware of like what type of timing are these developers?
I don't know what the timeline is. I think, we would have to, I would imagine we would vote on the waivers. We would also be asked formally to, ask you for the water and sewer. There'd probably need to be some sort of estimate for amounts, right? And we don't have any of that yet. So I don't know, but I think you described it really well. I think it's all about trade-offs, right? And I think as a board, the town board, we've discussed this a few times. We're going to continue to discuss it, and I think we're going to have to decide, what do we want as a board to out of this project? Do we want to have it adhere to the original zoning and, fight this out in court, potentially lose? We've talked to our attorneys. We may win, we may lose. We could lose all of the gateway zoning, right? And go back to what we had, 5 years ago with a great big parking lot and a big building. right? It's not, that's not guaranteed either way. It's, who knows how likely it is. We've been told it's not that likely. It could be likely. We could also not get the trail because the trail isn't part of the zoning at all, right? And as the person who commented said, the access on 299 is granted by the state DOT. Our planning board has no control over whether or not there's access off of 299. We don't have any control over whether there's access off of 299. If there is access off of 299, those people are crossing the Empire Trail. And if we don't have a path that goes through this property, we can't require it under the zoning. It's not part of the zoning. It has to be offered by the developer. If we don't have that path, I think it's a big loss for the town to have people have to ride on North Putt on shared bike lanes in the road. I certainly wouldn't want to ride on that with my 7-year-old. And I think other people in town wouldn't either. So we'll see. I think we're going to be talking about this as a town board probably quite a bit over the next couple of meetings. So
yeah, if I can interject, that's the problem I see is that we've really only discussed it once, as a board, and it's hard to characterize, especially because we had a recent meeting with the lawyers who gave us information that obviously I'm not going to discuss here, but we haven't had a discussion since then. So it's hard to characterize what we're thinking. And just something about, Neil, you mentioned this about the DOT, the entrance on 299. I believe what I understand is that it doesn't, just because the DOT says it can be, it doesn't mean the planning board does have some control to say no. I'm not saying they would, I'm just saying that that's what I've heard.
I find that incredibly unlikely. I mean, we battle with the DOT on a regular basis. Neil and I met with DOT on site down at Henry W. and 32 because the DOT, swears up and down that they need a southbound left-hand turn lane on 32 to go up Henry W. And my concern with that is then we end up with a much wider road. And, we're constantly pounding the table and saying, DOT, you realize we changed the zoning in the NBR. It's supposed to be a neighborhood district. And when you're building highway wide roads, it does not feel like a neighborhood. But additionally, there's tens of millions of dollars being invested in the Empire State Trail, and that's an Empire State Trail intersection. And we can scream all day long what we want the DOT to do. The DOT does what the DOT does, and we've tried at that intersection. And, they just insist that based on traffic studies and volumes that they absolutely need these turning lanes to make the streets wider. They need to make Henry W. wider. They need to make 32 wider. And, we all know that Putt and 299 is a totally different beast. The amount of volume that goes through there, the idea that anyone would be able to tell the DOT not to do what the DOT wants, I think that would be, maybe you have a magic wand, but I would be surprised.
Well, I'm not saying that I think either way, what should be done there. I'm just pointing out something that probably, it's fine. It's not.
Well, I'd just like to suggest we haven't had a conversation in a long time. Sorry, Julie, I thought you were done, but you weren't. Sorry.
That's okay. Well, I just want to say I do feel like this is our board. Neil and I are not ready to characterize what our board's stance is right now because we haven't had a discussion that was substantive following the information provided by the lawyers. So we've had only one discussion, which was during a public board meeting. At our last board meeting.
So I think we just need to, Tim, you're way more intimate than the rest of us on this. I think it's a pretty significant parcel and it's, it is the first one in the new zoning, or one of, I should say, I think is more accurate. So I think we should just, the rest of the village board needs to get up to speed. I need a little clarity on what are the parameters of our decision making? Like, how is it bounded? Like, it's just if we say yes or no, whatever we feel like, or is there
Who's the
some?
village board? What are our parameters?
Yeah.
Well, we would be asked whether to provide water and sewer, and we would look at it through the lens of like, well, what are the community benefits, and how will this be paid for? And I think what we need to do differently as a village board when we're thinking of extending limited resources like water and sewer, because the alternative is, do we provide water to a property that doesn't pay village taxes, or do we provide the finite capacity of sewer to a property that doesn't pay village taxes, or do we hang on to that for development within the village itself? And the challenge that we have all the time is a balancing act. Like, we have plenty of capacity at the sewer plant if it doesn't rain, but the gentleman who chatted with us earlier reminded us that it rains periodically in this community. We have serious inflow and infiltration problems, so that's why sewer capacity has to be thought of carefully. And it's the same thing with water capacity, has to be thought of carefully. But water is a little bit different because we're lucky in this community that we have the spigot to buy water from the DEP. But the other thing that we're doing is to source more local water to make sure that our clean, safe water is also affordable as well as clean and safe. So there's many things to consider. So if we're going to extend
That was super
water
helpful.
sewer district,
I just wanted to know if there was some bound. Yeah, so it's whatever, subjective or otherwise, we can just say yes or no based on our own. For some reason I thought there might be, whatever, doesn't matter. But can you remind me, Town, I feel like I knew, and maybe it was even said tonight, I missed it. How come you guys are sort of acting like a ZBA? I don't understand why the variance is going before the town board and not the ZBA. Or am I not understanding what's happening?
It was written into the code that way.
yeah, the new gateway zoning for the town, it includes this exemption. So you're right, in terms of characterizing it as a ZBA function, but to Julie's point, it's baked into this gateway zoning.
So every project variances have to go before the town board? What's baked in?
No, it's not a variance. It's I don't know if it's specific to this project or is it for all projects in this zone, but there's like an exemption.
We built it in to the to, I think it's the design aspect of it, not all the variances, but the design aspect. So and part of it was to give a kind of a pressure release valve in there and have the town board, be able to, account for some of these trade-offs that I talked about earlier.
Okay, I'll check it out. I must not have paid that much attention to that part because I was looking at fun things like maximum parking spots and whatnot.
Just to add one more thing.
It's been a while since I looked at it, and I don't even know if I looked at the final, but I'm a big fan of it, as I recall.
Just one quick thing about, because Tim mentioned, if they put in a bathroom and agree to maintain it, pay for the maintenance, and they haven't said anything that would indicate they would pay for the maintenance. So that's sort of, I don't know where that will fall, but there's no indication that they would do that.
So make that a condition for the exemption.
Yeah, I mean, if
the board was interested,
still having the conversation, it's still on the table.
This is not a, there's lot to be considered there. You know, does the village board know what the 2 exemptions are?
So I'm sorry, I thought there was still time for negotiation of these.
What are the 2 exemptions? Tell us what they are.
It's for to allow a fast food drive-through. Or, I'm sorry, I didn't mean fast food, a restaurant drive-through, and to allow there not to be a second story, so that density goal wouldn't be reached if they granted the waiver. If we granted the waiver.
Yeah, but that's why I thought I commented on that before. It seems like that makes sense to me in terms of an ask, because instead of using the parking for the second story, they'd be using the parking for the EST visitors.
Sure, yeah. But there's, you know, value in growing up, as you know, I'm sure.
Right, but then
Yeah,
you
we're
forfeit.
in
Then
a
you
housing
forfeit being able
crisis.
to host
We need to-
EST visitors.
Right. I mean, I think Tim's point, and I'm there's a lot of variables, right? And it's about trade-offs, but there is still time to have a conversation. I just want, I don't know, I'm just kind of surprised. I don't know. I'm confused, I guess.
Well, there's a lot of, if it's a real, you know, conversation, I would think that more board members would want to get in on it, and because there's a lot of factors that are involved in the trade-off, like the impacts, you know.
Yeah.
Traffic, environment,
So KT, you're right. Yeah, until the board votes on it, there's always time to negotiate, right? It's always like that.
Wouldn't that be enough? Wouldn't that be?
Tim, you said to me, and if I'm misquoting you, like, we can't say to them, oh, you have to do 2 stories or we're not going to approve it. Like, that's the town board. I mean, we could still, I mean, that could still be a board member's position, I guess. I don't know.
So I think what we like to reconcile it all, if the village board kind of like, we can have our own requirements that would meet, you know, what would make it okay for us to, you know, do our end, which is just the water sewer connection, right? But that has nothing to do with, you know, what the town board's, you know, requirements would be. Is that a good summary? Like, maybe a checklist would help us, like, as the village board, like, what would make us all comfortable with considering water sewer hookup?
Yeah, as soon as the moving target, I guess, is no longer moving on the town board end.
I'm just really nervous for the town, where it seems like this developer has made some changes by putting buildings in the front of the building, trying to create a streetscape, trying to integrate with the Empire State Trail.
That's in the zoning, so they have to.
Right, but they also have, they have also drew a line in the sand, and they're willing to litigate and challenge the new zoning. So all of those things are at risk of going away. And then you're just going to end up with strip mall hell at the corner.
Seriously,
299
is
and
the
Paltz.
risk of that zoning getting thrown out? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a fan of operating under those scare tactics. Sorry.
I think that's, you know, that's an issue.
Fight back hard if that was the case. That zoning is what zoning should be. It's exactly what the town should be doing right now.
Yeah, and KT, we all know how the property owners and landlords always have the upper hand, and the municipalities always get screwed over. So the idea that we would be successful in a litigation, I think is, I'm not, I would be scared to death. Yeah, on this one.
All right. Well, I hear you. I'm listening. This is a tough one.
Like, the town has to think, well, what do you want? What do you want at this corner? These developers own that property. They're going to build something.
Yeah, no, it's greatly improved. There's no doubt. Like I said about, you know, everything before, I'm going to view it from the right here, right now lens.
They don't have an option to purchase this property. They own the property.
I understand. Your position is clear.
So Tim and Neil, we've got a fire station going up there on that corner, as you're well aware, on Henry W. and North Putt. And the exit or entrance, if you will, onto that property, the connection for the Empire State Trail onto that property is very close to our new multi-million-dollar firehouse. Has the fire department of late been consulted in terms of the impact on getting volunteers to the firehouse on time and getting fire trucks out and doing it safely and all that business? Because we've got rescue and now we've got police, and it's a very busy intersection with bicyclists and pedestrians potentially crossing that road.
So you mean the entrance to the development?
Yeah, you know, where they've got the where they do the cut through the property with the trail, the EST trail, and it comes out. It looks like more Freihofers are just north of Freihofers.
Well, the alternative is that the bicyclists are on the road. Which do you think is safer for bicyclists and fire trucks? Bicyclists on the road or bicyclists on a trail off the road?
I'm not making a judgment on that. I'm just asking when was the last time the agencies were consulted on that.
I think when this went before the planning board, they were told, but none of this has gone before the planning board yet with the off-road trail part. This is still, you know, before it will go to the planning board once the waivers are granted or not granted. I think that's my understanding. But you know, the developer, I think that they knew about the fire station when the previous plans were presented before the planning board. That's my understanding, because we brought it up and we wanted to make sure that they were aware of that.
Yes, but my question is more for the side of the fire chief and the fire department, fire company, rescue, and police department. I believe when this started, we weren't talking about putting the police department where they're going now, or where it is to go now. I believe this project predated that.
It did, and there was a traffic study that was done in, you know, Dan Schneidman's letter, which was sent to the board today, that Tim paraphrased, and it did have some concrete information about what that found. I'm not sure if it says whether what was taken into account, but one of the things it wasn't was a drive-through for a restaurant. So there hasn't been a traffic study that counts for the drive-through restaurant, which is likely a fast food restaurant. We've had, you know, many people come to the meeting and speak about how they feel it would be like a de facto rest area, and then we've got a lot more traffic exiting right near where the firehouse is. So I don't believe that they accounted for the police station, certainly not in the original traffic study. But if you're interested, did you see Dan's letter?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
So
it's in the agenda. You can just click on it now and read it.
Okay.
Does it say did you catch whether it says the traffic study in 2019 accounted for the police station?
I don't believe that's mentioned here.
So we don't know. Sounds like.
I'm saying it's not mentioned in Dan's letter.
Right.
But I mean, I was on there's no question that the police station or the fire station has been discussed many times.
Right. I'm talking about the police station because that's what he asked about.
But if you guys are, I'm just really unclear, like, I would just love to know, like, what are you trying to move towards? Like this is like a planning board conversation, or you're considering the exemptions, you know, just the two things, the drive-through and the you know, whether to do the second story or not. You know, the drive-through stuff was also done pre-COVID, and you know, we've seen that, you know, Village Pizza, you know, benefited during COVID because they had a drive-through. I think pre-March of 2020, everyone would say drive-throughs are not necessary. Now the world seems to think of drive-throughs differently. So it's not necessarily just about traffic, it's also about contagious viruses.
Yeah, Tim, we think the town board's going to have these conversations. You know, I think there's not agreement across the board. You know, I love walking downtown and you know, getting some food at, you know, my local restaurants. But you know, that's not everyone, right? Some people like to drive and go to a drive-through. You know, I think for us to decide, you know, everything based on what we like is elitist, right? But I think the town board has to come to an agreement.
Well, also, Tim, you were wondering what what we're thinking, and what we're supposed to be thinking about is whether they've made a case, or you know, that would. I don't have the wording now off the top of my head, but they have to prove that it is a hardship to follow our zoning.
That's for a ZBA. I thought your exemptions has to do with, they have to prove that there's community benefit.
We have to.
Your zoning says that they have to prove there's a hardship.
We have to prove, they have to prove to us that there is, I'm paraphrasing this idea of a hardship, but yes, yeah. I'm looking for the wording, but it would take me a minute. So that is what, you know, we've had conversation with lawyers recently, and that was discussed. And the impact of our decision is not irrelevant either. Like the environmental impact. So one of the important things is to consider whether they have made a strong case that they can't do it following our zoning. And, you know, the idea that they don't have money to do, you know, to do a second story and provide extra parking, I don't know, you know, how that can be. They haven't proven that.
I think what's confusing about the points you're raising are you talking about like saying yes or no to the project, or are you talking about particular exemptions?
Only the waivers, the granting of the waivers, the waiver for the drive-through for a restaurant, and the waiver for not doing a second story.
Well, it seems like the trade-off for the second story is the parking that would be dedicated to EST.
Well, all I know is that's not really what, you know, we're supposed to be considering. We're supposed to be considering whether they have proven a hardship. You know,
Okay.
I think what Tim is saying is that if they build a second story, then they need that area for parking for the second story. So you can't build a second story and then not have places for people to park, right? And so we're also worried about traffic. And if we build a second story, we get more traffic and we need more parking. So then there's no space to have parking for the Empire Trail. I think that's the trade-off.
I don't know where this idea for parking for the Empire Trail came from, and I just am at a loss because I don't know about the benefits of that. Why is that something that's come into this proposal?
Oh, I mean, I don't know why it ended up in the proposal, but I can tell you that the county asks us for money so that they could expand parking for the Empire State Trail on 299.
They can
So-
ask, are they going to get it? Are they going to get it?
No, of course we said no. My point is that there's demand for parking along the Empire State Trail. The county believes that that's something that should be expanded. More
Well,
parking to accommodate EST visitors.
Mhm. Well, there are some trade-offs there. So, I don't think I need to go on about, or, it is appropriate for me to go on about my personal feelings about it. It's more of what our board thinks.
Well, you're on the board, so your opinion
I can
matters.
go on. You want me to go more into how I feel about it? I'm happy to, but
Okay, tell us.
well, I think the impacts of a drive-through are very great. I've followed, I went across country this summer following the COVID outbreak, and drive-throughs were always utterly packed. And they were very, very slow. So there would be a lot of environmental impact from idling cars. There would be the danger of, people trying to navigate a parking lot that also has a line of people waiting to put their order. We found when we were going cross country, they were absolutely the worst decision to try to get into a line of a drive-through. And this is just my personal experience. So, I drove across the country and we didn't go into any restaurants. So whether it was Iowa or, actually we didn't go to Iowa, but Illinois, Ohio, we always considered the possibility of a drive-through. And we found that all you do instead is take their curbside. We all across the country, we just did curbside. We called ahead because now all these restaurants have adapted. They just have adapted, and curbside is what they do.
So as a town board, if there are 3 people who say we don't want to drive through, you tell them that we're not going to give them the drive-through exemption. Like, that's the discussion. That's the conversation that you have with the developer.
We are going to be deciding as a town board whether or not to grant them the exemption. Yeah. So 3 people would do it. Is that what you're saying? And I will say that it's very important to consider what their reasons for not being able to do it. And that's something, that as a board we are going to be considering. So it's not just whether we want it or not, whether or not I drove across country and found them, horribly inefficient and frustrating and dangerous. That's not really that important. It is, the most important thing is, do they have a good reason? And impacts are important. We have, from our lawyer, without disclosing anything I shouldn't, I think I can say that, the impact of our decision does matter. So we have to consider the impacts of our decision. And, one thing last thing I'll say about the drive-through is that when I looked at the concept plan that apparently hasn't gone to the planning board, but there's a concept plan out there that was shown when they presented at our board meeting, and I couldn't figure out where, and they didn't help us figure out where it would go, but I couldn't figure out where in this interior design, where there's an interior parking lot, where would these cars line up? And to me, they would have to be lining up in front of their building, not like on the street side. And so that would be, basically there would be a parking lot, all these cars lined up to go through the drive-through, and then the building. So they're kind of in an interior parking lot, and it seems very dangerous. So I just saw, the potential for, pedestrian and bike and car conflicts. Tim, have you seen there are reasons for wanting waivers?
Yeah, you said the second floor and the drive-through.
No, the reasons. There are reasons that they need the waiver.
They have a statement?
Yeah. So that
I've not seen it.
we could get you that. And like I said, that's something we're supposed to be considering. That's the main, because without that, we could be, arguably sued by citizens who feel we didn't have we didn't follow what we were supposed to be doing, which is to be considering their application, their reason. Do we appreciate their reasons? Does it seem like it stands on solid ground? So yeah, I do recommend, if anyone's interested, they can look at that.
Yeah, could you email us?
They can, yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that seems clear to me is like you would consider the exemption for the second floor because of the Empire State Trailhead features, including a bathroom. That seems like a good thing. That seems like that's in line with what Ulster County wants, what New York State wants.
Without any
having parking for a visitor.
I brought up when they were at the meeting, when Trans Hudson's lawyer and someone else, another representative, was at the meeting, I brought up who is going to pay for the bathroom, and they didn't offer.
Yeah, we already discussed that, but what you can do is you can push back and you can encourage them to pay for it. I think there, you can also make the case that like as cars get off the thruway, if it's clear that they can park right here and then get on the Empire State Trail, you could make the case that that's fewer cars on Main Street, which is a favorite topic for New Paltz residents to complain about.
So we have a lot more stuff on our agenda. This has been super helpful, but I'm going to interject here to hope that we can move on.
Sounds good.
I'll definitely try to watch your conversations. I totally heard you, Julie. I think you said some important things, and we should just have a public conversation about the pros and cons. And like I said before, I think it's a very special parcel for a lot of different reasons, and having a public, well thought out discussion about what's going to end up there with all these constraints and factors is important. And yeah, so can we do that? Can we go to the next?
Yeah, it sounds good. I think having conversations like this are really important, and having public conversations where we're understanding the pros and the cons, and how to get the developer to build something that will be palatable to New Paltz residents is important. So I'm glad we had this conversation, and we should continue to have more. All right, I'm going to move on to the next item, purchase and sale agreement with the Mohonk Preserve. So there's a 2.4 acre parcel where we have a groundwater well. We tested it. We want to connect it to our water treatment plant that's up there off of Mountain Rest Road. We got an appraisal that was done by Ackerley and Hubble. They appraised the 2.4 acres at $10,000 in total. So we have a purchase and sale agreement with the Mohonk Preserve. The reason that it's only $10,000 is because it's a landlocked 2.4 acres with a bunch of conservation restrictions. So the only two entities in the world that would consider it valuable or would even be able to access it are the Mohonk Preserve and New Paltz. And then the reason that the town and the village are both involved in this purchase and sale agreement is because the water treatment plant property, because it's not contiguous with the village, is actually a town-owned parcel. So the town would be purchasing this 2.4 acre parcel. The village is going to go ahead and front the money, and our anticipation is that we're going to get reimbursed from the New York City DEP through the permanent water IGA intergovernmental agreement that we have with the DEP. So this is basically a purchase by the town in name only. So that's the quick summary. I'd like to make a motion that the village board approves me signing this. And then do you even have 3 people to vote on this?
No, but we have a meeting tomorrow.
Shit. Okay, you have a meeting tomorrow. Okay, so that's my motion. Will someone second it?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then Neil will take this tomorrow. And I motion that we move the joint meeting minutes from October 1st.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then the eighth item on this agenda is Alana has been the planning and zoning secretary for the village for some time. And we're finally going to do something that feels like a shared service initiative. We're going to share Alana. She's a very good planning and zoning secretary for the village, and she's going to take on planning and zoning secretary responsibilities for the town. So this is an agreement. She'll essentially be a full-time employee of the village, and then the village will invoice the town for the hours that she works at the town doing the planning and zoning secretary work, so that the village can be reimbursed. And both the town and village attorneys, as well as myself and Neil, have reviewed this document, and our treasurer has reviewed it. So I motion that we go ahead and sign it. And then Alana, who would be in this position, would also be signing this this agreement as well.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then Neil, you're going to take this to your meeting tomorrow?
Yes, I will. And so I really appreciate this. And, Tim and I and Alana, we've been working pretty hard on this. And she interviewed with our ZBA and our planning board chair. She really won them over. You guys know Alana already. She's great. And I think the important thing to realize here is that we're each paying for a half-time employee, but we're actually essentially getting a full-time person. So, she's going to be able to answer the phone for either the village planning board or the town planning board, because she's going to be doing both jobs at the same time instead of just, 20 hours for the town and 20 hours for the village. So I think there's a real benefit here. And I think, especially on the town's part, because we're going to be getting, you guys have seen the improvements that Alana has made with, Google Docs and, Zoom meetings and everything else. And I've sat in on some village planning board meetings, and she does an excellent job of running a meeting and running a Zoom call. And I think this is really good. And it's a good first step for how the town and village can increase the amount of working together and shared services. So I'm glad you guys approved it. I'm going to bring it to my board tomorrow night.
Yeah, I would add to that. I really feel like this is exactly the kind of stuff that the New York Department of State wants to see us doing. And I think it benefits the community members in New Paltz too. So if you're an applicant before the town or village board, there's a seamlessness by having an individual who's familiar with the process in both the town and the village, the zoning in both municipalities. And then we also currently use the same attorney. So that attorney works well with Alana. Alana enjoys working with them. So I think there's some synergies on a few different levels. So I think the town and the village end up providing better service to our constituents by sharing this individual in this role.
And I'll add communication in there. Tim, I won't highlight the department, but years past there was the communication between the town and the village for the type of development that was going on was that they read it in the New Paltz Times and then made notes of it. We can do better than that. I think we're already doing better than that, but I think having someone who works for both the village and the town is really gonna improve on communication going forward. Yeah,
it's really a bridge between the two building departments. I think this is it's a great important step. All right, so that's it with the joint agenda. Is that right, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, motion to adjourn the joint meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You guys don't need to vote on this. There was never actually a joint meeting happening.
Oh, we never opened it?
It was never quorum.
Oh, it was only the village portion. I see.
So the village
Whatever.
is having a super meeting.
Okay, so then I'm gonna add, because I never updated the village agenda, so I need to add item number 6, approval of records destruction.
Bye, guys.
Good night.
Thanks,
Good
Julie.
night.
Motion to move the village consent agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And then a couple of items I wanted to add to this village agenda. One is a concept regarding making a portion of Huguenot Street one way. The other is the failing soffit at 48 Main Street, owned by property owner Wayne Bradford. And then number 4 is a proposal regarding raising water rates. So I motion to move this section of the village business agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor? So is Misha here? Misha's an individual interested in serving
I
as
just
a,
see us.
what?
I just see us and Ari. That's it.
All right, do we have any word from Misha?
So yes, she did email me and said that she'd prefer to join another time when the meeting does not run so long, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay with that.
So Misha was here, but then had to leave?
I don't know if she ever actually joined, but she was watching and we were emailing and
Okay.
yeah, so I mean, it is late. It makes sense. So I'll ask her to come on the 18th.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next item. So this is a concept that was introduced to me by one of the residents on Huguenot Street, and you can see what's written. The concept includes making the section between Broadhead and Mulberry on Huguenot Street one way in the northbound direction. So that mean there would be no southbound direction. You could still go on Mulberry, and when you get to the intersection of Mulberry and Huguenot, you could make a right and continue north on Huguenot Street, but you would not be able to make a left and go south. And the thinking is like, this is kind of like part 2 of what the village did when we closed that section to traffic in both directions on Huguenot Street. This is kind of a more pedestrian focused initiative. No question that one-way streets are a drag for people who like the optionality of two-way streets, but I don't know. To me, it seems like this is something that we should consider.
I love this idea. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So,
yeah.
Any reasons that you want to share as to why you think it could work or be useful?
So, I'm a person that walks around a lot, especially late at night during this COVID era, because, I'm alone on the streets then. And I feel like, I know for a fact I've had just so many interactions with, people who seem like they're lost a little bit and like they turning around and stuff, just always on that corner. And it's always when I'm like out jogging in the dark, which is bad in itself. And I'm sorry, but at least I'm wearing like reflectors, but, and it's always that one little spot where I run into people who just seem so confused, that they can't go further, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Any other, initial impressions from the village board?
Can I add one more thing? I remember when I was clerk, a presentation from our friends down at the Huguenot Street, historic Huguenot Street, really talking about that kind of had driven the first move of the first bit of closures, really talking about the impact from, centuries of cars, and especially big cars these days, continually like on the pavement nearby. And I just recall the radius, I think is actually a much bigger radius of how that impact does actually affect like those historic buildings and like their structure. So the further out we can go kind of, without having lots of vehicle traffic and start slowing it down and getting it out unnecessarily, I think would also really help those historic buildings, with resiliency in general.
Yeah, and I would add that, this section that we're talking about, reducing the number of cars, it has some of these historic houses on it. So, we would be protecting those structures straight away by having a little less volume.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that walk it, so I like the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at this point, Huguenot Street, especially the section with the stone houses, is almost like a linear park.
Yeah.
And this would help. But what I told the individual who floated this idea, I said, we can take the temperature of the board, but I think what would also be helpful is if she wanted to take the initiative and do a petition or make a point of trying to see if her neighbors felt similarly. And she said unofficially that's the feedback she had, but I told her it'd be really helpful for us if she wanted to get some sworn statements or names.
I'm not opposed to the idea. I think it'd be good to consult the church because that would impact their parking lot. Because if Broadhead is going to be two-way, people may use the church parking lot as a way to get up Broadhead. Or is that whole Broadhead down to Huguenot one way as well?
No, Broadhead would remain two-way.
Right. So my concern would just be within the church parking lot, and the church would be the best people to speak to that.
This individual told me that I believe that they spoke with the church, but I would agree, same idea. Like we need to hear from the residents, property owners, as well as the church. So yeah, we're definitely not going to take any. I mean, I don't even want to move forward to the public hearing unless we had a lot more feedback to consider. But yeah, absolutely, that we need to hear from the church. What do you think, KT?
You're muted.
I don't really have a position. I think everything sounds logical, and I like the idea of tapping the pulse of the neighbors. I mean, there's a lot of compelling arguments, but maybe there's counter arguments we haven't heard.
Yeah, there definitely may be counter arguments that we're not seeing straight away, and that's why we want to take our time and ask for feedback, because there might be some other things that we're not considering. All right, so I'm gonna encourage supporters of this idea to gather some statements to share with us. But our initial impression is yeah, maybe. So we'll go from there. So the next item is this has been a concern of several of us on the village board for some time. The property at 48 Main Street. So that's where Mixture used to be, and I guess there's a new shop to get minerals or jewelry called Dancing Hands. But it's a multi-story mixed building. There's a failing soffit. If you're on the Main Street side of the building, you can look up. I've seen debris from that soffit fall to the sidewalk in the past, and we have encouraged our building department to push this property owner to remedy this situation. I'm personally very nervous. I feel like several of us on the board have expressed similar concerns. But it's not easy to enforce things like this. So we've been working with our attorney and our code enforcement official to figure out next steps. And I believe Corey had a conversation with the property owner this afternoon, but I don't remember if we were supposed to take an action tonight or if Corey's just going to continue to just try to work with that property owner to encourage them to make these important repairs.
Yeah, Tim, I have observed it over the last couple of weeks, and I was positioned there on a fire call a couple of weeks ago, and I felt like there was a breeze, and I look up and there's something floating in the air, and I look up, take a closer look, and it's definitely soffit. It was insulation being blown out of the gaping holes in the soffit, and then last week or so, I noticed that a large chunk of material is sort of dangling from the very edge of it. So it's precarious, and I think it needs to be taken care of right away.
Yeah, what actions could be taken?
And that's what we've been banging our heads against the wall for some time now. I have emails going back to 2016 trying to address this. But we're really, trying to, figure out what our next steps, and I feel like Will and Corey are on top of it. Okay. I don't know, maybe we should even call Corey right now to see if there's any late in the day thoughts on this.
You want to text him first? He's got a small child, so.
All right, I just sent him a text. So if we hear back from him, then we'll continue this conversation. So I'm going to move on to the next item. So, we have this groundwater well project where we're trying to connect these wells that we've drilled and tested. And the plan is to connect them to the conveyance system. We have a couple of wells at the Memorial Pool Park, and then wells, including the one on the property that we're trying to purchase from the Mohawk Preserve next to our water treatment plant. So, we spent some money doing this development work, and the way our agreement is worded with the DEP is that they're going to reimburse us for the water that gets permitted by the regulators, including the DOH and DEC, but only once we get the green light from them. So what we're considering is raising rates, and this is also COVID related too, in that we're earning less money just because they're in our water fund in particular, just because there's less demand for water since there are fewer college students on campus. This puts us in a COVID is a challenge for New Paltz because we spent $5.5 million constructing a new water plant at Mountain Rest Road because we believed that the demand would be the demand that it's been for the last several years, and we did not anticipate not having the cash flows that exist when the college is in session. So it's partially related to earning a little bit less money right now, and partially related to we've borrowed money while we're waiting for reimbursements from the DEP. So the concept is, so we have a total of 6 different, actually it's 7 different steps, because we have a base price if someone uses less than a certain amount of water. and then we have a total of 7 steps. So it's like the base plus 6. So as the steps get higher, you're using more water and you pay a different rate. So our thinking is to not impact the smaller water users, but to apply a 10% rate increase to the 3 largest users. So these 3 largest users all use more than 200,000 gallons per quarter. And just to give you a sense, like a single family home on average uses about 15,000 gallons per water. So this is really like apartment complexes and the big restaurants and the college would be the larger users who would be impacted by this change. And this is, money that we need to make sure that we don't default on the debt that exists because we've borrowed money to update our water filtration plan.
So for context, we've sort of floated this idea for a while because it's been a long time since we raised rate. Is 2012 the right recollection of the last time the village raised water rates?
Yeah, that's right. The village hasn't raised rates since 2012.
So, I mean, even before COVID, we were, occasionally we would say, it's been a while, maybe we should take a look at this.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that, we've been working so hard over the last several years to source more water locally is if we can source more local water from groundwater wells, that will save us money than buying expensive DEP water. The DEP charges us $1.83 per 1,000 gallons when we buy their water. It's gone up something like 289% or 269% over the last 16 years. I think it's 289% over the last 16 years. So it's an annualized increase of 9%. I know that's the correct number.
Right. So in the big picture, it's investment in money now in order to save more money later.
Yeah, and I also, I've been trying to, manage our treasurer's expectations in terms of this groundwater well project. Like Nancy's on board with the idea of being patient while we connect these wells, but it just takes a really long time to do the engineering and the design work and to get things like the alienation process completed with the state legislature. It's like an incredibly involved project to get these wells connected. And I've been telling Nancy for some time, let's hold off on raising rates. Let's hold off on raising rates until we, because currently we buy 60% of our water from the DEP, and if we can buy a whole lot less than 60%, that would be, potentially very good for our water fund's expense picture. But it doesn't seem like that's happening, immediately. So probably the prudent thing would be to go ahead and raise rates, but also like not officially promise, but state that this is a temporary rate increase. And because I would love love for it to be a situation where we can then actually lower the rates back down to what they currently are once we prove that sourcing more local water helps with our expense picture in the water fund.
I support it. What's the process?
The rate, it's curious because the rates are actually memorialized in village code for sewer, but they're not in code for water. So I have to find out for certain how we do this. But it's, I really just wanted to float the idea by the board that we were considering this and just to see if you were largely in favor before we dug deeper and figured out exactly how to do it.
This makes a lot of sense to me.
Great. Bill and Michelle, do you have any feedback?
No, I like the exploring the idea.
Same here, Tim.
Okay, so Nancy and I will continue to look at it, and we'll.
One question I have, and there might not be an answer anytime soon, but just thinking about for, these bigger buildings that would, be affected. Just one thing I noticed about the water bills and stuff is it's hard for those of us who are renters, tenants in some of these bigger places and stuff to ever even have any idea what our water bills would even look like. So it's hard for us from a conservation perspective. So just, wondering if there's a way we'd be able to, support these folks being able to access, the tools needed to be very aware of water consumption and stuff. Because I think that's important for everybody, but I think it would be important for the big buildings too.
Well, one of the things that we did with the town when we worked with them to get the town water districts to update their meters is they have newer meters which you can keep track of usage. So the meters that are in the village are, in the next few years, they're probably going to need to be replaced. That will be a big project that the village will have to figure out in the next few years. So during that time, we can also update those meters so that they're the kind that you can, keep track of usage on your phone, which is useful for conservation, but that type of stuff is also super useful because then you can get alerts if you have a leaky toilet, because leaky toilets and issues like that can sometimes lead to a higher bill. But that's further down the road.
Cool.
All right, so we'll keep working on that idea. I motion that we move item number 5, a resolution for bills and claims.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then do we have liaison reports for ZBA or PB?
Yeah, Tim, I wasn't able to make the meeting, but I called the chair, John Linton, this afternoon, had a quick conversation with him. Just 2 things happened on the meeting on Monday, which was arranged because of the holiday, election day yesterday. There was a porch addition approved for 2 Da Vinci Way that went through and was approved. And then sort of a pre-application plan for a couple of ranch houses up on Millbrook Road by Floyd Niffen at 17 Millbrook Road. And I asked him about that and about sort of having a pre-application conversation. And I think at one point we talked about not having all these pre-application conversations because it was taking me up, so much time with the planning board. But given the schedule that what's being scheduled lately, they seem to have the time to do this. So it's sort of a pre-review before coming before the planning board. So they seem to be in favor of it. So I just brought that to his attention.
Got it.
For ZBA, after months of not having anything, there is a meeting scheduled for the 10th. But the ZBA currently doesn't have a chair because John Litton has moved over to the planning board. So if there's no chair, they'll just appoint somebody to chair that meeting at the time. I reached out to John to see, we have to appoint, but I don't know if there's interest from anyone. We haven't had a meeting in months and months. So just need to check in with everybody again and make sure everybody who was on the board, is still able to attend, all things considering with COVID changes and such. But it seems like it. I haven't heard otherwise.
Can I share a quick environmental policy board update? Because I was a few minutes late. Just an announcement. Did I interrupt anything? Sorry. Just wanted to share on the 14th is Saturday. The 14th is when the landscaping project outside Village Hall is happening at 12 noon. And there will be like a Zoom component. And I guess I'm making a Facebook event also. And there's the letter in the paper that's out and all that stuff. So, mark your calendars. It's gonna be awesome.
Got it. Well, I think that's all we have this evening, right? Did we miss anything, Ariana?
Nope. You guys covered everything.
Imagine.
Okay. A motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Okay, good
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Good night. Thank you.